What is up, everybody? Welcome back to Devy Royale YouTube channel. I'm your host, Kevin Coleman. Today, we're back with a Dynasty mock draft, but this is one of those fun ones that we like to do. We did a Dynasty mock draft with every class eligible. You heard it, 23, 24, 25, and 26. So you Devy fiends out there, you college football fans, even, hey, some of you guys that play college fantasy, C2C, those type of things, like you should be excited about this because you're going to start seeing player values. And I will say this, the hardest thing out there for Devy managers to do is to value their Devy assets with their dynasty assets on the NFL side. It's just incredibly hard. So what we're going to do on this mock is we're going to show you where those top guys are getting drafted. We did 12 rounds, how you can kind of manage this. Where are some outliers? Where are some values at? I'm going to hit you guys with those. Where are these Devy assets kind of going? I'm going to give you a full breakdown of every Devy asset kind of drafted so that you can see respective values. So when you're out there making trades, you're not flying blind. And that's what we're here to do. Give you some content that not everybody else is doing. And we appreciate you guys. So while the intro is going, hit that like and subscribe button. Then we'll dive right into this mock and let you see where your Devy assets are being valued. All right, let's get into it. I had to put my boy Travion Henderson on the thumbnail because he's getting disrespected out there in the dynasty world and the Devy world. But let's dive into it. Let's go through the rounds, and then we'll just kind of go over it as a whole and just kind of talk about what we're seeing. So first 3 rounds. So we're gonna dive into like what we're seeing out there. Overall, you got Mahomes, Hurts, Allen, Burrow, Herbert, Fields, pretty much the same thing there. Nothing really changed in this one except for it, and we're gonna talk about it. Bijan Robinson get into the first round. So this is the first time we've seen Bijan get into the 111 mark. So when you're looking at him overall, you have to like what you see there in terms of like the value. And like, hey, if you're gonna go get him like that, I like that. I think it's a different kind of strategy, and I like that. He's the only one worth the first round pick in my opinion, and that's where his value is at as well. So when we're talking about him, we're really looking at him, except for Caleb, which we'll mention in a second, as the third highest rated kind of player on the board. So when you're thinking of like if you have the 101, that's how he's getting valued. Or if you have Bijan, if you're in a league, that's the value right now. Now, when you're looking overall, though, the biggest news out of this one is Caleb Williams going as quarterback 8. So he got drafted before Lamar, before Anthony Richardson, Watson, Young, Murray, Stroud. Like, that's the way Williams getting valued. And then when I put it out in our Patreon, we actually had someone that's in a startup right now just like this, and someone took him as QB4. So if you're thinking of Caleb Williams, if you have him on a roster right now, he has pretty much hit his ceiling, right? Already QB8. He's the only guy of that class in terms of where he's at that high. Look at Marvin Harrison Jr. coming next, right? So that is an asset worth knowing, like how highly ranked he is. Then you have Marvin Harrison Jr., who goes as wide receiver 10, which is still, when you're thinking of value and thinking where these guys go, wide receiver 10 is pretty high. So he splits in there, and you're looking at it at the 306. Right in between T. Higgins and Olave, and then right in before Smith, London, Metcalf, and then after Garrett, right? So when you're thinking of Marvin Harrison Jr., you're thinking that he's going to get drafted as you think, hey, right away, top 10 guy in the league. And so those two guys' value is the higher than we've seen. Now, I will say this, these guys that drafted in this are very, very smart people. And so I do think that they had a more nuanced take on where the Devy value should be. Whereas I think we did one a month ago where it was more like Devy friendly. This one was more like NFL asset friendly, where I think it should be. So if you're taking it from either one, this is the one they'd like to look at and see like realistic value where these guys are at, right? And then other than that, when you're looking at the board, you can always stop it. So if you see kickers there, that's because that's where the Devy placeholders are. Everything else, nothing really stood out. Dak going in the second, I think was surprising, or the third, excuse me, is surprising there where he's going. I think he's a value right now. But overall, those are where your picks are in terms of where everybody's getting valued right now, especially there. Now, if we go to the 4th, 6th round, so we're looking at rounds 4 through 6, there was only 3 Devy players taking these three rounds as well. So overall, in the first 6 rounds, only 5 Devy guys. And I think 1 is, like I said, this is a smart group. I think 2, when you're looking at it overall, I think people are more weary about Devy prospects, right? Brock Bowers goes as tight end 3, though, which is something to behold at 402. So you're seeing there, Brock is already when you're looking at the numbers and the metrics and everything there, I think we all think, hey, that's probably where he should be. But hey, tight end 3 is a very hefty. So those 3 guys, Harrison and Caleb and Brock, are getting valued extremely, extremely high in Devy and Dynasty circles. So do that with what you may, right? Think of like what you can do with that information. And that's why we're here. That's why we do this crap, is to show you kind of where you can maybe get some value, maybe for some guys that you want to go win now on the other side, what you can get for these guys, right? Drake May goes next, but not until the 409. So when you look at the 409 there, he goes a little later, but that's actually going to be QB 18. So he's still getting drafted kind of like, generally speaking, where Devy quarterbacks should probably get drafted. I think there's hesitancy with Drake May. He goes right after. So when you're looking at a Tua, so that's kind of his value right now. And then before Wilson and Lance. And then Lance coming in at 509 is kind of a shocker. He's fallen down a little bit since the beginning of the year. But May, what do you think of May? What do you think going forward? He's got a new offense coordinator. Receivers are going to be kind of suspect. So I get where the quarterback 18 going. I think the big shock for me was Bowers going as high as he did at tight end 3. So again, when you're thinking of value, those are kind of where the values are. Now, the next guy that went in this round, so just to show you, Emeka Egbuka, wide receiver 23, which is pretty good value for the wide receiver 2, presumptive of the 24 class. He went right before DJ Moore. Then you have Terry McLaurin, you have Traylon Burks, Addison. So he goes before those guys. I think statistically and analytically, Egbuka is right there. And I think with that 24 wide receiver class, if you haven't seen the video, go watch it. I broke down the guys. I think there's a pretty clear tier between these guys. But those are the only 3 guys that win in those categories. So when we're thinking of like, hey, who goes in these areas? That's who you have. And then you can always pause it and look. Swift going in the 6th round. Let me know if you think that's a value. Jacobs at the 6-0. I think it's 608 right there. When you're looking at it, Najee Harris, Brandon Ayuk, Marquise Brown. So you see the other guys that are there, but that is kind of the value. So when we're thinking of elite Devy assets right now, so let's think of tiers. Not a lot of people do tiers in Devy. I think it's, Caleb and Marvin, and then maybe Bowers because of where he went based on tight end position. And then it's a tier, and it's got Drake May and Egbuka. But we don't see Egbuka go as the 5th guy going in these Devy drafts. He usually goes late round first. So maybe in Devy drafts, Egbuka is getting value lower than what he should be, right? And then I think maybe, hey, you draft him late in the first, you're excited about that value. Now, let's look at round 7 through 9 and kind of go through these. This is where we're going to see 6 guys taken. So we're going to see a little bit more here. And running backs now. So these are going to be running backs. And when we think of running backs, I think one thing that's happened in Devy, Dynasty, everything, running backs are getting devalued. So again, I think with the pendulum swing of where we're seeing this, so Dynasty managers are going heavy wide receiver now. I think that there is a case to be made that NFL teams are going more 12 personnel with the tight ends that we're seeing coming in the league, the bigger running backs. And if you can get a guy like Raheem Sanders, even Travion Henderson as a bell cow, that might be your new Travis Kelce. I think maybe we're going to see a shift here. And if we're going to see this, their values, right? So Travion Henderson didn't go to the 7th round, but he's still running back 14 because no one's taking running backs. So again, that is an interesting development. What's going on in Dynasty leagues. I can't be clear enough. Like you need to figure out what side of trend do you want to be on. Are you going to stick with the wide receiver, build through that, go zero running back like a lot of people are doing? Or are you going to see this and say, you know what? People are undervaluing Travion Henderson, Raheem Sanders, and Devy, college, whatever the case may be, whatever leagues you're in. I'm going to go get them, right? So that's why I think this is enlightening. And I think it was actually kind of cool to see Raheem Sanders, 707, running back 16. Some people have him as running back 1. So you can get him in the 7th round. You can build through that, go through wide receiver. So here's a strategy for you. And we're going to go through the other running backs that got taken in these rounds. Maybe you just go quarterback heavy, wide receiver heavy in those first 6 rounds. You get a guy like this in the 7th or 8th, and then you just go get some zero running back guys, Cam Akers, some of these other guys that are on the board here, and you just build and say, hey, I'm going to have a stopgap, and I'm going to get these guys in the league. That might be a way to build a dominant Devy roster. And I'm just telling you, in a dynasty roster, if you're in a combined draft like this, heavy, get your quarterbacks, get your stud wide receivers in those first 5 rounds, and then get one of these guys, these top guys in the running back class, the 24 class, and then just get some late round running back flyers you can fill in. Then you can compete this year. You might be able to win it, but then next year you're set up to be in the money. And I think that is the strategy that you use based on the development and kind of the ADP that I'm seeing. Now, after them, you're going to see it very quick. So you're going to see, hey, and we're really, 705, 707, 708, 711. So these guys go quick in that 7th round. Nicholas Singleton goes next, 708, running back 17. We're thinking about where he's at. Then Braylon Allen goes right after that, 711, running back 18. So they're getting valued right in that running back 14 to 20 mark. That's where the value is at. And I think that's an interesting kind of development of how these running backs go, because before they were getting drafted way earlier. Bijan, even Henderson was going around 3 or 4 last year. Now it's not like that. So I think that, managers are getting a little nervous about that. Then After that, we're going to have our next guys. So we got Quinshawn Judkins and Will Shipley. So Judkins going to 809, running back 22. Will Shipley, 902, running back 25. So when you're looking at just their value and where they're going, Judkins, again, some people have them as running back 1 of the 25 class. You have Shipley. Some people have him as a top 4 back of the 24 class. So that's value, right? Like if you believe in Shipley, if you think he's going to test well enough, you think he's going to be that guy, getting him in the 9th round is a hell of a way to kind of build a roster. Think about the guys that you could grab. The tight ends, the wide receivers, the quarterbacks, you can grab in those first 8 rounds. You get a guy like Shipley, and then you flip it around in the 10th, and you're going to see some of the running backs available. You grab one of those running backs that are available in the 10th, and then now you're going to have a good build, like a fun build, right? That's kind of how I look at these drafts, so you can kind of, catch the value, see where that value's at, and go from there. Now, let's go to rounds 10 through 12. Overall, though, if you're looking at the other guys in this draft, I mean, this is kind of the old, hey, I'm going to take a shot on some guys, Dobbins, Bateman, Charbonnet. Those other ones that are there. Now, let's go to the 10 through 12. So this is where a lot of guys got taken here. So we're going to see a lot of shots get taken. But overall, I think this is the wide receiver group. Okay, so when you're looking at 1001, wide receiver 44 is Evan Stewart from Texas A&M. I took him, so full disclosure here, we're going to talk about him. But I still think if you go watch my 25 wide receiver, video, I think Evan Stewart's getting undervalued. If I can get him at wide 44, I'll take that all day. Malik Neighbors goes next, and I like Malik. He just needs to stay his ass out of trouble, right? Wide receiver 46 got in the news recently for a weapons charge. I think he got dropped, but overall, like if he can stay healthy and stay off the freaking field and doing stupid crap, he'll be up there in that 24 class, right? So he's going to be much more eligible than Evan Stewart, although I'm just going to take best player available, and to me, that's where you have him. Then we're looking at the board here. What comes next? Drew Aller, 1102, quarterback 29. I think that's a great pick. I like Aller. There are basically 3 quarterbacks I am comfortable drafting. Maybe 4, but 3 guys that I'm comfortable drafting heading into Devy drafts like this. And that's going to be Caleb, Drake, and Drew Aller. That's where my line is. And after that, I think it's a crapshoot just based on ADP. I'm okay with taking Aller here. Then you have Zachariah Branch, wide receiver 47 at USC. He's doing great in spring practice already at USC. You already kind of heard talk about it, how he's got, drill, workouts, everything. I think he could be a difference maker. That's not a bad pick there at 1103. Then we have our guy, Luther Burden, coming in at a wide receiver 50. And I don't mind that shot right there. Some people have him as their wide receiver 1 still in the class, or at least top 2. Like you should have him both in your top 2 with Evan Stewart. So if you can get him at wide receiver 50, that's pretty good value. Cade Klubnik comes next, and that's the one I'm worried about with Cade. Obviously, going over like where he's at and his value. You got to be careful with that one. And then Trey Benson, running back 39. And I love this one. And shout out to the guy who picked this pick. He just wanted me to talk about him. He said for content purposes. So you're my guy. What I will say about Trey Benson, I think he has a chance to rise up. And to his credit, like I think that he's coming in. He's going back to Florida State. Could be very, very good for him. I've talked about him as underrated. I talked about him on my videos. I think Trey Benson moving forward is someone to keep an eye out because he can probably be slipping in that running back 5 march. 4 and be like, hey, bro, this guy came out of nowhere and he really didn't. Like, look at his build, what he can do. He's kind of special there. And then you have Xavier Worthy, wide receiver who's fallen off big time. So I just wanted to note that he was going up in that 6-7 rounds over there. Now he's at wide receiver 52, 1206. Overall, just that's a tough one, okay, for where you're at. Now, final outlook. So let's take a look. And this is where I always tell people, hey, stop it, look at it. But I'm going to go through some teams first, and then we'll kind of give you guys a rundown. So my team here, again, I like that 0 running back build early. So I took Lamar, I think at 112, I think that's good value. Then I took CD, Metcalf, Jackson Smith, and Jordan Addison. I said, you know what? I'm going to build young. Give me that wide receiver 1 and CD. Give me that, low end wide receiver 1 and Metcalf. JSN could be that mid-tier wide receiver 2 or maybe ceiling wide receiver 1, right? Addison could be right there. And then I just said, all right, I'm going to build through my running backs with Swift and Akers. I'll take a shot on Swift and just look, hey, hopefully he gets that pass catching work. Akers looked good last season. Maybe he steps in. They rebuild that offensive line. Then I took Mayer and Ingram, and I said, hey, I'll take that. Goff has looked good at the quarterback position, and then Allen late, and I took Evan Stewart, right? This is generally how I like to build teams anyway, through wide receivers and those late round running backs there. And I could have easily just said, hey, maybe I'll take, instead of taking Swift, maybe I take one of the other running backs like Travion Henderson and those guys like I talked about, and then continue to build that way. But that's just kind of how I built. I wanted you guys to take a look at this team as well. Psych Ward, FF, my guy Matt, really good guy. I like his build. He went young, Jefferson, Stroud, Olave, and then he goes Kels. And then he told me, he's like, hey, I want to get some young guys here, right? Like he's like, I want to kind of go through it and just grab some players of value. And there's guys that I want to take. So he took Emeka there, Daniel Jones, and then he goes, then he goes right after Daniel Jones, and he's looking at it. He's like, hey, where am I going to grab next, right? And he goes ahead and grabs Raheem Sanders, and I think those are good values. That's kind of how he built. Then you got Downs and Hopkins, so he kind of went a mixture of old and young, trying to kind of win now, compete. But then he set himself up with his young picks, with which he got, right. So when you're looking at on the board, Luther Burden right there, taking him, and then at the 1206, you're taking Xavier Worthy, and you're hoping those guys kind of break out. And so I thought that was an interesting build with the younger build kind of going through it. And then you look here, you're going to have, and I thought this was the youngest build, and I wanted to kind of highlight it. Bijan, Anthony, straight up like ceiling play right there with Anthony. Drake London, and then you just go straight, young picks here. Jordan Love late, Miles Sanders, a chain, Herbert. So I thought it was interesting just to show you kind of different builds there with how young they are and where they're at. And then this is the overall board. So as always, like, stop it, look at it. I'm going to give you guys a cheat sheet here in a second of where the Devy players got picked so you can kind of work through it. But that is kind of, that is where, this draft kind of goes play. And I will say, like, that first round is pretty much on board, except for Bijan. And then obviously Caleb going at the 110. But let me go through the drafted Devy assets for you guys so you can see where they get drafted here. So Caleb, Marvin, Brock. So this is the ADP of everything that went. Overall, when you're looking at it and just understanding, like, hey, how many players went? So, this is kind of where they go. So here's the first guy selected. Second group selected: Singleton, Allen, Judkins, Shipley, Stewart, Neighbors, Aller. And then we're going to have Zachariah Branch, Luther Burden, Kate Klubnik, Trey Benson, Xavier Worthy. And that is how it shakes out into the draft. I hope this helps. I know understanding Devy values and how to kind of what you can move players for is extremely, extremely tough in this format. So these videos are just to help you. Like, that's the biggest case here in a niche, very niche fantasy league that I know not everyone plays, but I know the people that do are good people. And so I'm trying to help you guys understand value and player value. We do have Devy plus Dynasty rankings up to date on our Patreon if you want to check that out. But this will also help you kind of show you I like drafting real people because it shows you where they value players and it's more common in your league. So I appreciate you guys. Hit that like and subscribe button. We'll check you guys next time.